and welcome to a special episode of the Self-Aware Entrepreneur Show. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that we've been on a little bit of hiatus, and the next series isn't due for a month or two yet. But I am coming and beaming into you live today with an episode with a special guest and someone I simply couldn't wait for the new series to have you exposed to in such a positive way because I can create an introduction, but really she should introduce herself. But I am going to do her really justice because ultimately, Sarah, speaking to her, it's one of those times when you just know a person they almost feel like they're about to take off like a rocket because they just have so much to bring value-wise, experience-wise. And ultimately, what I'll do is I'll give her a little introduction and let her kind of sparkle in her own little way. So Sarah is a coach, but it's so easy to just think about all those coaches that are out there, people who pop coach on the LinkedIn profile and, share a few positive quotes. But Sarah is a serial coach. She's actually set up a number of different businesses, but she's also started and succeeded in a number of different careers, in a number of different professional services. She has moved at speed. She's been successful in education, in the workplace, and in setting up startups. In fact, she's packed so much in to the past 15 years. You'd look at it and you think it was 3 different people. If you looked at her CV, it's quite amazing. And what that has done is really allowed her to see 2 consistent themes throughout that journey to really produce success and see what success means. The first one is that actually she's seen transformation in a variety of different environments and has got a really deep understanding of how to help businesses and people go through that process. And secondly, she started to see that success, it's so subjective, and there's a lot of people who look like a success but actually haven't taken that second step into their successful selves and really started to get a feel of what that's actually like, and utilizing that transformational knowledge that comes from neuroscience, psychology, coaching, and the corporate world. She's binded all that together to become the entrepreneur, and that is something that's quite beautiful and something that's quite unique. So what I'm going to do now is pass over to Sarah to just give you just a little bit of an overview of her view of the world, because it really is rich and it brings so much. So thank you for joining me today, Sarah.
My God, thank you so much for having me, Lee, and thank you for that introduction. I feel honored to be here for this special episode, and B, I feel like you've explained me better than I could have ever hoped for. But I'll just give sort of a nutshell version of what I do at the moment. So I'm a transformational leadership coach, and I work predominantly with entrepreneurs that really want to take their business to the next level. Yep. So what that means is they're kind of maybe around the $750K to $1 million mark, and they have plans to really 10x or more in the next 5 to 10 years. And they are people who understand that, yes, you have to take action on the outside. I'm a big action person, but it's also all of that internal personal development work and really understanding who you are as a leader and how you can lead other people to the kind of performance levels that they're capable of as well. Because it's the team that builds these big multi-million-dollar businesses. And I also will be launching a new group program for early stage entrepreneurs starting out in their journey and wanting to build 6-figure businesses themselves to start with. So that's me in a nutshell at this moment in time. Success, I will go into in more detail later, but the very word itself is just so open to interpretation, and a million different people will probably give you a million different answers.
Yeah, it's so subjective. And what I actually really like about your work, Sarah, is sometimes when people say 10x, they imagine the kind of egopreneur type 10x, where you run around and you're shouting and you're gonna build the empire. But I love how your kind of vision of it is actually the entrepreneur. So going in and looking at that self-awareness, looking at that development, looking how you can start to grow, while kind of also looking at the extrapreneur, so to speak. So looking out to the fact that you don't grow something that's meaningful without other people. And it's a highly interconnected world that we're in. And, you know, removing the kind of the business growth from just the figures and just the ego, and actually widening it, looking internally and then external to the connections, is something that really, really resonates with me. And what I'd like to do now, Sarah, is actually dig in to that rich, you know, multifaceted experience that you've got from, you know, your qualifications in differing countries through to the different companies you've worked for in your corporate career, where you've scaled and then decided, maybe not here, so let's start again and do the same. And, you know, creating those vertical success kind of mantras from different places. I'd love for you to dig into that for 5 minutes.
Absolutely. So I suppose you could call me a bit of a career chameleon. Mm-hmm. I've never felt limited in my career the way that, you know, people tend to think of it. I always knew that skills are transferable and you can take skills from one area to another. And if you can combine your skills with your natural talents and strengths, then you have the opportunity to create something really extraordinary. So to tell you a little bit more about my journey, I started my career as a tax accountant, which actually I love telling people because they always look surprised. I trained and worked for a top 10 accounting firm. And as soon as I had qualified as an accountant, I went to work for a multifamily office. For those people not familiar with that, it's basically a collection of high net worth individuals and families. And the multifamily office is responsible for looking after them in totality. So everything from investments to businesses to lifestyle stuff as well. So I went to work there for about 4 or 5 years in their relationship management team, and was looking after a portfolio of colourful high net worths, colourful characters. And it was sort of 2 years into that the seeds of unrest really started. So I started having what I would call a crisis of integrity, where I was like, I don't feel happy. I don't feel satisfied anymore. I don't know what's wrong, because when I started that job, I absolutely loved it. What's not to love, really? And it just got worse and worse and worse. And I thought, okay, well, maybe if I move job, that will help. So I started looking around for other jobs. And still there was something not quite right. And I didn't end up moving in the end. I thought, okay, I really need to go a bit deeper here before jumping ship. Yeah. So it's around that time that I co-founded my first startup, when my friend approached me and said, hey, do you want to start this business with me? And I was completely rose-colored spectacles. I knew nothing about entrepreneurship or anything like that at that time. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Long story short, I ended up leaving the corporate world at the end of 2015. I'm proud to say I've never gone back to work as an employee in a corporate. That first startup was a big learning curve for me. Yeah. So the thing that allowed me to psychologically take the leap from corporate to a startup, and I think it's important for people to understand this. Number one, I had a financial cushion. Yeah. Because I think that's very important. Number two, I remember my psychological thinking at that time was, this is going to be it. This is going to be the thing that I'm going to do for, well, not forevermore, but it's going to be me and what I'm doing. And basically, I was working for about a year on it full time. And during that time, my relationship with my co-founder completely broke down.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I stayed, the friendship would be over.
Yeah.
I also knew we had completely different visions for where we wanted to take the business. And quite frankly, you can't have two leaders arguing all the time about, the direction, vision of the business. So I said, okay, this was your idea. I'll retain a small shareholding. You do what you need to do. So anyway, she's still running that business today. And after that, I was in a place where I was like, right, I need to prove everyone wrong. So this was one of my major life motivators. I went to huge effort to prove people wrong throughout my life. So if someone said I couldn't do something, I was like,
that's it.
F you, I'm going to go do it. And I was determined to build a tech startup because, I was like, well, be a woman in tech, that sounds cool and it's difficult and it'll be a challenge and it's all good. So let's just go do that. So it was a vanity project. Let's not beat around the bush there. There was no passion behind it or real want or longing. And to cut a long story short there, 2.5 years, I was really suffering internally. So to the outside world, it looked like everything was going swimmingly. We had investment to build a MVP, so tech platform. I brought on a small team. I brought on a co-founder. We were getting traction. We were getting people using the platform. And inside, I was just like chronically stressed, chronically anxious. I nearly burned out twice in 2.5 years. I was working. I was working around the clock. It was just a nightmare. And I'm quite open as well. I was a nightmare to work for during that time.
Yeah.
It culminated in my co-founder saying to me, kind of at the two-ish year point, hey, I've got this investor that's going to put in a load of money. Aren't you happy? And I was like, no. I can't describe it anything as other than my heart sank because I was like, oh, I'm going to be tied to this for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I did that, I would go down a very dark place because all of my relationships really suffered during that period as well.
Yeah.
So the price was too high. If I went back to do it again, I would do it with something I actually care about because I think that makes all the difference. So anyway, I ended up walking away. And after I did that, I literally got so many emails from people being like, oh my God, why? Why would you do this?
Yep.
You put all this time. But I knew intrinsically that it was the right decision for me. And I knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur, but I wanted to do it in the right kind of business.
Yeah.
So I was doing kind of bits and pieces of consulting for tech startups at that time, but I was like, right, I'm going to take 2 months where I don't start any new business or new project without really being sure what it is that I want to do.
Yeah.
So it was during that time that I actually came across transformational coaching. And I'd never had that kind of coaching before. I'd had very practical based coaching like fundraising coach or career coach or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was so, I don't know, it was life-changing. So I thought to myself, well, hey, what if I could do this for other people? How would I be? Would I be good at it?
Yeah.
So the next stage was to experiment, to do some qualifications, find out if I was good at it. And I was like, hey, I am good at this and I enjoy doing it. And to kind of summarize the end bit, I niche down to a particular audience that I really resonate with, because I understand from personal experience, a lot of the struggles that they face. And what I do is combine coaching often with that more consulting element as well, to really get those results that leaders are looking for.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And if there's one thing I do want to dig into, it's the fact that you've made a number of choices over the years on your intuition. And how did it feel when you made that intuitive choice that I need to leave, even when society was saying, "What are you doing?"
Do you know what? So 2 things to say there. Number one, I was talking to a former client of mine a few weeks ago, and he said, "Sara," he's from the US. Well, my accent isn't very good, but he was like, "Sara, when you're making a decision, if other people say you're crazy, you're on the right track." Because people tend to think within restrictive parameters. So that's point one. Point two, on the subject of gut and intuition, I challenge anyone to say to me that they had a gut feeling. So let's say the gut feeling was, don't work with this particular person, or don't partner with this particular person. I challenge anyone to say to me that they had that feeling, overrode it, and it went well.
Mm-hmm.
There is not a person yet that said, "Oh yeah, I overrode my gut and it went really, really well."
Yeah. And I think we know, don't we, that ultimately we're here as a species today because of that very intuition, and not putting ourselves into collaborations, partnerships, where we were going to put ourselves at threat of, moving too far away from who we were, and really kind of, I suppose, getting to a point where we ended up repelling other human beings, because we're a species that not particularly predatory on our own. We've got like these naff claws, and we can't run quicker than most other animals that would eat us. So it was a way to kind of connect and understand. And obviously that goes back into that interconnected aspect of understanding ourselves so we can connect more deeply with others. But what I want to do, Sarah, is to think about, that type of entrepreneur, because of the experience that you've been through. What are those entrepreneurs actually thinking right now? What thoughts will be going through their mind that you can come in at that point and help them, get through that period?
So they know that they want to achieve more, and they understand that doing things in the way that they have been doing them is not going to get them to the next level. So a way to think about it is, the version of you that builds a $1 million business is not going to be the version of you that builds a $10 million business. You need to step into this new identity and way of being and do things differently in order to achieve that. And it can be quite counterintuitive, right? Because I've had clients say to me, "Well, Sara, I mean, how can I see myself as that before I'm there?" And I said, "Well, how can you make decisions from that place and achieve that without having the mindset of a person already at that stage?" So, that kind of links in with the internal piece as well. Understand what your vision is, how all the pieces link together. So what's the personal vision, the company vision? Where do you see yourself going? What kind of identity and changes do you need to make internally and externally to get to where you want to be? And I've seen it time and time again, with the right mindset and the right actions taken at the right time. So focus, if we can summarize the outside bit, achieves extraordinary things in what other people to consider to be a short time frame.
Yeah, and that kind of accelerated process is really powerful when you're looking to achieve that growth. And would you say that kind of principle and that transformative work that you do also helps people see, if there's a point where they intuitively know that it's time for me to bring in somebody else to take that step because I'm not the person to be in that position at that time.
So you mean if they step back from the role they're doing at the business?
Yeah. So obviously deciding where to place themselves in that wider matrix.
So that can happen, yes, but generally they already have an idea of who they want to be as CEO of that business. They just haven't quite got there yet. And they acknowledge that and they want to work on that.
Yeah. And what few tips would you give to people in that position where they're looking to scale and accelerate that ability to scale? What few little bits of advice would you give them to think about and take away today?
So, number one, what is your definition of success? To come back to that word. Again, I've heard so many different varieties of it, from I'll be successful when I have $1 million business. I will be successful only when I retire.
Yeah.
No, I've heard that as well. And, if that's his definition of success, that's his definition of success. He wants to build $100 million business to retire. Fine. Whatever is your definition of it. But success is not only about achievement, it's about how you feel along that journey. Because what's the point if you get to the end of the road and you've literally killed yourself and all of your relationships to do that? Unless your impact on the world is so great that you're prepared to sacrifice everything to do that.
Yeah.
But the point is, you do not have to make that sacrifice. You can do it in a way where you don't have to sacrifice yourself for that. And I think the other point here is, okay, map out the kind of aspirational vision of leadership that you need to be that person that helps bring that business to the next level.
Yeah.
So what does that person look like?
Yeah.
And then it's on a practical level, it's really analyzing everything that's going on within the business and identifying what's working and what's not working. So, for example, I have a client that came to me that wants to 10x, right? And he said, well, Sara, I'm working with a load of low-paying clients that drive us nuts all the time. And he didn't need to be doing that, right? It was just kind of a default that they'd fallen into that got them to the level where they are. But if they want to up level and they want to do different types of consulting work, etc., they need to be very clear about what they're offering and to whom, and start to strategically go after what they want. But it starts with knowing what you want. And that, I find, is the problem with a lot of small business owners. There's no clear vision of what they want.
Yeah, and that clarity plays a massive role in being able to at least chart a path and course correct as you move towards that vision. And as we come towards the end of the show, Sara, what I want to do is just have you spend a minute giving people information about your new startup group and where people can find more information about you.
So you can go to my website, which is sarasabin.com. Sara without an H. I always have to clarify that.
On the screen.
I am very active on LinkedIn as well, so you can always connect with me via LinkedIn. In terms of the new program I'm launching for early stage coaches and consultants, I will be launching that in January next year. As a new branch to my business, but that will be for coaches and consultants that want to build a 6-figure business without sort of all the faff and paying for PR and expensive strategies and working every hour God sends. So I'm going to really lay out a roadmap that I have used as well in my business. So that's the new thing. But obviously for any entrepreneurs that are at a stage where they want to get to the next level, please do reach out to me.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend, Sarah, you spent 25 minutes listening there and realising that she's been there, she's done it, but also she's spent a lot of time reflecting and picking apart, and she's very vulnerable. She's been open and said, I've made poor decisions, I've been a bad leader at times. How often do you get that from those people who are running around saying, I'll help you do a 6 or 7 figure business? I've never done it myself, but I've read a book. I can teach you, I'm sure. And the beauty is that Sara, everything that she brings is through that lived experience. She's taken her industrial knowledge and she's actually building that transformation into products to help people to remove those barriers, to really start to be able to see and really center themselves, get that internal work and be able to express the best self. So I would heartily recommend that everyone takes a look at Sara's work. Just reading some of her blog posts and some of the posts and articles that she's written on the internet. Connect with her on LinkedIn because she does a lot of really valuable content there as well. And if there's one thing I can say about Sara's content, you'll read it and you'll have at least one question that pops into your head after reading it and, realizing actually something I can ask myself here, and that might well just be the question that gives you that clearer vision and helps you start to move forward. So, Sara, I want to thank you for being my special guest today on our special episode.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. And we'll be back in January with the new series with a whole bunch of guests who, are waiting in the wings to come and share their knowledge with you, to expand that world of self-awareness and really bring entrepreneurship and turn it into something not as flat, not as flashy, but something that shows you the real behind the scenes, the juicy bits, but makes it also a lot more three-dimensional. So, Sara, thank you for joining me today. Everyone tuning in, thank you, and have a lovely rest of your year, and we will see you again in January.